Free will, the cherished concept that we humans hold so dearly, is nothing but an illusion. It gives us a profound sense of implications of our actions. But free will, not having free will, is something that I won't really worry about. I neither should you. This happened last week that I casually, one day I woke up in the morning and I checked my Instagram, and on somebody's stories they were talking about free will. There was something written around the lines of, what is the point of being alive if you're not free? And then I just casually, it felt like I could have a great intellectual debate with this person on this topic. So I just casually texted them that if you give me a permission, I want to ask you a question. And I knew that I had something cooking in my mind and I wanted to let it out. So that person very generously gave me the permission, and I sent her a text saying, "What do you think about free will?" And it's one of the broadest questions that I've ever asked, but considering her generousness, she replied. And I basically asked her, "Do you think that we humans, do we have free will or do we not have free will?" And she said that she gave me her whole perspective that we have. She was of the point that we do have free will, and spoiler alert, I'm on the other side. I don't think that we have any free will. So, but that doesn't mean, as I said, we shouldn't worry about that. We're going to talk about that in this whole video podcast. But she was saying that we do have free will, and we went into a really nice discussion, and it was really nice that having that discussion. It gave me really a lot of points to learn from, and actually the idea for this thing that you're watching. So welcome. So we were having this. I remember that even before this, I remember that when I just joined my university, I have this one. I have this one friend slash mentor slash teacher, and he's a really good. He's a really good all three. So I remember that we were once talking about the nature of reality and what reality is. And I know when you're studying social sciences, and especially they're new kids, they're new into the university, they don't want to entangle themselves with these things like, oh, what is the nature of reality? Oh, do I have free will? Or what am I going to do? They don't want to talk about that. But I, being the person that I've been interested in all this. I was being a nerd in personal development and philosophy and physics as well. And I guess free will is the point where all three of these converge to some extent. Physics and philosophy a lot, and a bit of personal development as well. And I was like, and this guy, he basically told me that we humans, we don't have any free will. And I was like, how can you say that? I do have free will. Like, I have the will to choose anything I want right now. And he says, oh, really? He says, I'll give you three markers. I'll give you these three different options. And there was a red and a blue and a green one. So he said, imagine that these are three different pastries or cupcakes that you're given. You went to a bakery and there are these three different cupcakes that you have. And which one would you choose? And I said, I would pick this one. This is my free will. You gave me a choice and I picked this one. Now, he said that when I picked that one, he said that one had poison in it. And I was like, that's unfair. How could you not? Like, you have to tell me that. He said, no, that one has poison in it, and you eat it and you die. And then where's your free will? Now that is not the greatest example of free will that I've ever heard, and and that really, it really shocked me. It was like, how could he? And I was like, how do you relate that to life? He said, in life you're given the same exact choices without actually knowing the context of them, without actually knowing the causal relationship of where they came from, and you just have to make them. And you make them with the best of your ability, but you don't know the consequences. Even if you do know the consequences, you don't know the context of where these choices come from, or the behind the scenes, if you will, of these choices. So it was really interesting. Now let's talk about like what is free will and what free will do we actually have. Free will is, this is a big problem in philosophy. And before we discuss all of this, I think a lot of philosophers have actually, I feel, there are a few philosophers that I'm studying right now, and they're really amazing works. They're philosophers that I really admire and I've learned a lot from. But, a lot of philosophers, even in the earlier times, like we start from Greek, Plato, Aristotle, most of these people, I feel, yes, at that time, that was, I don't know how, in the context of that time, in the context of ancient Greek, how was this taken. But I feel generally you study philosophy and you're like, a lot of philosophers have lost touch with reality. A lot of philosophers, they, even though they try to explain reality and they try to answer questions about reality, and I think more than answering questions, they're better at coming up with better questions. They're not as good as answering them as much as they are uh, good at coming up with questions. Like, let's take something as stupid as, what is the meaning of my life? I mean, they're just like, every philosopher will try to give you their own answers, and they have their own thing. And there's existentialism, absurdism, and all these different religious philosophies, and just so many different things, right? There's so many isms in it, and you're like lost. Like, what am I supposed to do? So they've lost the point is that most philosophers have kind of lost touch with reality. Like, you read them and you're like, oh, okay, that's a nice idea to think about, and you think about them and you're like, okay, how can I apply this in my life? How does this improve? It's like, yes, if you talk one of the things that you can one of the things that I've seen people who are intellectuals or who study philosophy is like, oh, I have this great idea. I'm going to go talk to all my intellectual friends. I'm going to ring them up and I'm going to tell them how great my idea is. That's not really an implication of an idea. I think an implication of a philosophical idea must be that you apply it, and as a result, something in your life improves, or something in your understanding, or something in your being improves, and you actually just it's actually a better way of showing up in the world. It gives you a better model to understand reality, because that's what I think all of our learning is. It's model to understand reality. And by the way, all our learning is shrewd. It's very it's to this day we are lost when we are trying to understand reality. We form up concepts and views, and I think this is a recurring theme that has came up in the several videos that we are talking about in the emotional the series that we are doing on emotional fitness, emotional intelligence, and also on the education system. If you're not seen those, they're in our channel. Go ahead, go see them as well, go listen to them. It's a recurring theme that is actually coming up, and I think it's because it's a thing that I'm thinking about. I feel that our concepts of the world are really shrewd. They're not that good, or they're not that real, or they're not that accurate in that sense. We think they are, but I don't think so. So, and I'll give you an example, a really quick example. So, for example, you might be living in a place where you might be living in a part of a world. I'm judging, if you're listening to this, that you're living in a part of a world where there's electricity and you have basic electric facilities and you have all these things where your home is generally powered by electricity. What if one day the electrical wires in your home go haywire? You don't know what's happening. It's like it's a short circuit somewhere, but it's like it's everything just kind of turns down. You would be lost. You're totally ignorant in that space. If you're in the general public, you don't know what to do. And the same would happen if, the whole city goes, the power of the whole city goes haywire. And most of the residents of the cities will not know what to do. And the same happens if you're going to your morning meeting and your car breaks down. We're really on the brink of ignorance there, because you don't actually know what am I supposed to do now? So the problem is, it's like it's that. So all philosophy, I feel, all learning in that sense is all about coming up with models that help you navigate the world. Now the problem with philosophy is, a lot of these models are, yes, they're nice to talk about, they're intellectually thick, and they give you they give you a nice trouble in understanding the world. I even saw somebody on Instagram, and they were talking about all these big, I think he was an analytical philosopher. He was talking about all these big words and actually didn't mean anything. It was just a bunch of philosophical jargon. So it's when we talk about free will and the problem of philosophy, yes, we're going to tackle the philosophy bit. That is a bit of jargon. We're going to make it as simple as possible, because jargon is not something that I can take, at least. I'm small brain, okay? So and so the thing is that we're gonna make it as simple as possible, and we're gonna make it as close to home as possible. So free will, when we talk about free will, a lot of the things that the intuitive idea that comes in mind is that, okay, right now I have a bunch of possibilities to choose from, and I'm free to choose between these possibilities, and hence I am free. That is the kind of the thinking that goes inside of our mind. But that is not the way that when we think about free will, we're going to talk about it. But let's say the question, I think the conversation that we were talking about, the conversation with that girl on Instagram, uh, she gave me an example. She said that, okay, you have right now, I am, as you're talking to me, I have the free will to not talk to you. I have the free will to choose. But which decision you're going to make? And what is it that helps you make that decision? And you might be thinking, okay, I make that decision myself because I'm a conscious being. I have a mind, and I think that, okay, if you're a good person, you're talking to me, I'll tolerate it and I'll talk to you. But if you're not a good person and you curse and you blame me and you do bad things, then I won't talk to you. So I'm making that decision ultimately. But then, how do you know that? And this is a problem that comes up in neurology as well. And Sam Harris actually writes about it in his book Free Will, that neurologically, if we study your mind and we study the decision making process that goes on in your mind, and they did studies on this, is that what happens when you're making a decision is not actually you're making the decision, your brain does that processing for you. And when your brain does that processing for you, what happens is you are just aware of that. And by the way, your brain does that processing for you, gives you the decision, and you become aware of it, and you think that I've made it. And the way that they studied this is that uh, they were studying brain activity in, I think, the prefrontal cortex or the prefrontal lobe. And in the prefrontal lobe, if the person wants to move up, or if the person was given a direction, if the person was, yes, given the choice between choosing two buttons in front of them, before they move their hand and press the button, there's this, it was like milliseconds before, but it was enough to measure it, that 800 to 1000 milliseconds, I think, that the motor activity, the activity in the prefrontal lobe, it goes on, and after that the person actually starts moving their hand. So it's that they're not making the decision itself, the activity is going on, and then you're becoming conscious that, okay, oh, this is the button that I want to press. And they also did a study where they showed that if you only 800 neurons, if you read only 800 neurons in your brain, and you're reading them, you can predict when this person is going to move. For example, when this person is going to walk. And by the way, that the same process happens, that your the brain does the processing, and then you become aware of it, and then you act on it. So how do you know that? I mean, these studies, and they have done this in multiple different domains, and the answer is always the same, that the brain does the processing, makes the decision, you become aware of it, and you think that you've made it. Now, even at this point, you can talk and debate for hours and hours, like, how do you know that you're making the decision, in fact, when you're just becoming aware of it? And we have scientific data, we have evidence to support this, that you're just becoming aware. Your mind, your mind, your brain is doing the processing, and you're just becoming aware of it. For example, you go to a restaurant, and you want to have a breakfast. You go to a cafe, you want to have a breakfast, and the options in front of you are apple pie, chocolate pie, blueberry pie, and there's coffee, and then there's bacon and eggs, all these different things that you could have. Which one would you choose? And it might seem like, on the surface, it might seem like there are all these different choices that you have, but on the contrary, if you look at another level, the choice is already made. You're just going to have to, your brain has already made that choice. Not your brain has already made that choice, but in a big enough time span of the universe, the choice is already made. You're just becoming aware of it. And you become aware of it as your brain does the processing. It hears the choices, it does the processing, and that choice, by the way, is affected by so many. If we take the causality link, and we link it back, the chain of cause and effect, and we go all the way back, we can trace your choosing, for example, bacon and eggs for your breakfast, all the way to the Big Bang, because that is where the initial particles of everything, including you and bacon and eggs and the cafe, it all came from there. So it actually was predicted back then at the Big Bang, and it's like we didn't know that. We were not conscious of that, but now this is where it gets into physics, that, and also a bit of differential, that, if you know the initial state of the particles of any system, you can predict at any point in time how those particles would be. And so you, me, bacon and eggs, cafe, your brain, my brain, it's all made up of particles. So if we take down this road, if we go down this road, we can actually conclude that all the decision that yes you do have, you might have supposed choices that you have choice to choose between a breakfast menu, but actually the choices are made back then, and you're made. And even let's take it, let's hit it a bit home, let's hit the home run here. And the thing is that even if you don't go all the way back to the big bang and the particles, and you see that how the particles, we can actually, how differentials, and you using all these different physics, we can actually say that okay, if we know the initial state of any system in a particle, any particles in a system, we can actually predict them how they're going to look like in any time of the system as well. So we can do that. But the other thing is, it might happen so the reason that you chose bacon and eggs, it might happen so if you were grown up in an environment. For example, let's take two different examples. One of the scenario is, let's say you were born in America and you grew up in the countryside, and the best breakfast that your mom ever made you was bacon and eggs, and you had it every other day, and it was like, and it was like a special breakfast that you had when your family came together. And now you're living in, let's say, New York, and you don't have that. You're living away from your family, and sometimes you miss your family because you're alone. So I'm in that scenario, when there's the option of choosing a breakfast, there's a high possibility that you would go for bacon and eggs. Now, you didn't decide that. Your past, the place that you were born at, the family that you were born to, the habits that they had, you didn't decide any of those, but those things actually shaped you and shaped the decision that you're going to make in that moment. But let's say the other scenario, for example, let's say you're born in a Muslim country, and it's a place where you never have, as you're growing up, you say that bacon is not something that you eat, and they are highly against bacon. They don't want to eat that meat. And in fact, the best breakfast that they have is just I don't know, it's a cup of tea and maybe some pancakes. So if you're born in a Muslim household, and you're grown up in a Muslim country, and you're born in that place in a specific time, that I think we're pretty sure that what you're going to choose. So even your brain is like programmed. Even your unconscious self is so programmed by so many different factors that were way beyond your control. For example, you didn't control the parents. Uh, you didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose the time you were born. You didn't choose the space you were born at. You didn't choose their habits. You didn't choose what shaped them. And in fact, they didn't choose. So it's like a big system that you're a part of. And you're bound by the system. And this is where I think my understanding of this came in, that actually you're a sum of learned experiences. And your sum of learned experiences includes your genes, not just your psychological, your unconscious self, but includes your genes, your neurology, your psychology. I mean, parents you had, time you were born, so many different things. So the decision that you're making, that you're thinking, oh, I'm making a completely conscious decision, is based on so many unconscious forces that don't even get me started about it's like every single force in the universe is like backing you up, because it's all a big chain of cause and effect that's going on. So, and actually the decision was made long before, so it's not your free will to choose those things. It's like, yes, you're given a choice, but the choice was an illusion. And as this is where we go into the system model, that it's like you're bounded by these systems, and there's all these different systems that you're bounded by. And it's like there are different parameters which are set in the system. And yes, within the system, you might be able to have these choices like bacon and eggs and all that, and even those are questionable. But let's say you have different choices that you can make, they are in front of you. And even in this sense, you cannot escape the system. This is something that you cannot never do. It's no go. It's not possible, because you have a body, you have genes, you have neurology, you have a brain, you have conditioning, and you cannot actually escape all of these things. That's not like you cannot totally escape all of these things. Not physically. Like, yes, you have this meat suit that you carry around all the time. It's like you cannot escape this. You cannot escape gravity that's working on you. So you're bounded by all these systems and all these different systems. So within the system, yes, there's different parameters you can change. For example, I can decide to wear a black shirt, or I can decide to, and even by the way, I can decide to wear different colors of a different shirt. And even that decision making, we don't know, like, is that even ours, or like what's up? So concluding all of that, and yes, there was a single point that we missed, and I really want to talk about that, is that the concept of randomness. And randomness is, I'm reading a book, The Black Swan by Nassim Taleb on it. It's very interesting, but it talks about a little different type of randomness. We are here talking about randomness in the physical world, and in quantum mechanics, we see these different random events. And but based on those random events, you cannot say that okay, you cannot predict those random events at all. And actually, that is how we define these random events, that they are not predictable by anything, not you, not anything at all. Because that's what makes it random. That's what makes it uncertain. So we can definitely rule those out if you're thinking that, okay, but what about quantum mechanics and the random events that actually happen there? So maybe I have free will there. So doesn't mean that. So keeping all this in mind, I thereby conclude, I know I'm keeping it short. You can talk about, this is something that you can debate for hours and hours on, but thereby conclude that free will, your free will, is nothing but an illusion. Yes, you do have choices. You think you have different choices, but maybe the choices that you've made are already made. But this doesn't mean there's this whole, like, there's this big jump that people make that I don't have free will. That means I'm, whatever destiny has in plan for me, I'm gonna do that. It doesn't mean that. It just, for example, it doesn't mean this is what we call fatalism. So I don't necessarily equate free will with fatalism. For example, like, yes, if you don't have free will, that's something else. But saying that, okay, I'm just gonna sit here and I'm not gonna take responsibility for anything, and okay, my life is now, it's like controlled by this big thing called destiny. There's just two different narratives. You can't actually equate them, because fatalism is, it's more about, it's more about, I think it's more about giving up in a sense. Yes, and that is actually, fatalism is when you do give up. But in the free will model that I actually gave you, even if free will is an illusion, you do have to play the game. You do have to go there and see the menu and apparently think about, your brain has to do the processing. And even though your brain, it's like it's in some model, it's actually defined that this is the choice that your brain is going to make, but you do actually have to play the game to see the choice, to uncover the choice. So you, yes, there is no free will. Yes, it is an illusion, but that doesn't mean that you can sign off from the game. That doesn't mean that you can just escape your responsibility. Like there's a piece of paper that you can just sign and you can say, okay, I'm out. I'm not gonna play. That's not how the game works. You do have to play the game, because, and to me, this is also very exciting, because then you see the kind of choices that, okay, oh, okay, this was gonna happen. Okay, that's great. That's great. Because let's say if, I think it's a very boring kind of life if somebody came to you with all their power and knowledge and omnipotence, and they said, I know every single decision that you're going to make, I know every single move that you're going to make, and I'm going to tell you it right now. Like, I'm going to tell you which turn you're going to make, I'm going to tell you which disease you're going to have, I'm going to tell you which person you're going to meet and when, and what their hair color is going to look like, and what their grandparents were doing for a living, and like, it's tell you every single detail, I think. And they give you like this thick of a book on it, just like, go ahead. I wouldn't burn that book, because that actually takes the fun out of life. That is the fun, that you do play the game. And by the way, if you think, let me whisper this to you, that if you think that you have been having free will and that is actually giving you a good life, go on, keep thinking that. If that is actually making you happy, go on. Just like, there's nothing wrong in that as well. You can keep thinking that. And if you think that, okay, I do want to rethink my life and I do want to do this, that's actually great as well, because again, those are two choices that you have even right now as you're listening to me. And the one that you make is like, and yes, it's also determined. It might be, it is determined in some way, the choice that you're going to make. But you do have to do the thinking. You do have to act like, or maybe you do have to pretend like there's, yes, you yourself are making the choice. So you do have to do that. So it's not like you can't just let off ownership and you can just, just sign off from the game. It's not that way. You do have to take ownership. You do have to sign in, and you do have to keep doing these things. So now, with that said, before we move on, I would like to invite you to subscribe to my newsletter that I send out every single week to all my subscribers. It's called Truth Thursdays, where every Thursday I send bite-sized wisdom to help you become a... Now as we move on, I would like to discuss this model, and this is where it gets practical. And it's really simple. It's really common knowledge, and I won't take a lot of time because there are a lot of other people that you can read or listen to on this, especially in the personal development world. It's like it's called the trade model of the world, and I think it's a very efficient model. It's like the world is set up is in a way that you have to give something in order to get something. So let's say you want a healthy body, you have to give up eating that sugar, or you have to give up that chocolate, or you have to give up that snacks, or you have to give up your rest and put in hours in the gym. That is the only way to do it. There's no other way to do it. There's no other long-term strategy to do it. It's like it's simple, and it's like every choice that you make comes at a sacrifice. And this is where it comes with choices. It relates with free will, is that every choice that you are going to make in life, it's not actually going to come at the sacrifice of what you're going to give in order to get that, but it's also actually going to come at the sacrifice of a million different choices that you could have made. For example, in this moment, there's an infinite number of choices that you could make, but you end up choosing one, and that one has its own consequences, and every other million out of every other million possibilities that you could have chosen, every single one has its consequences, but you end up choosing one and you end up facing the consequences of those. So you do have to understand this, and you do have to, it's like, this is very common knowledge, but it's not common wisdom. It's like people are uh, most people, they're not even making choices that are their own. They don't think about that. They don't make calculated decisions, and it's not that every decision in your life has to be calculated. And by the way, free will model again, it's like it's not like every decision that you make in your life is so thoughtful. But again, you do have to play the game. I'm gonna hit that point again and again, that play the game. It's like, yes, free will is an illusion, but you gotta play the game, man. So because you see the unfolding of the real you see the unfolding of reality, and at the big bang we have the initial state of the particles, everything you can actually predict. It's like you can actually make that model, and you can say, okay, this is and this and this and this is going to happen, but we don't know. You and I, we don't know, because our consciousness, our brains are not able to take that much information and process that much information. And we're just, so our job here is not to, it's to witness this creation. It's to witness the unfolding of the universe. And I think that's a pretty beautiful job. It's a pretty beautiful thing to do, that okay, I'm here to witness. It's like I'm here to adventure. It's like I'm here as an adventurer, and and I'm witnessing all these amazing things. So that's our job on this universe. And again, before I sign off, I would invite you to think about the trade model of the world. It's like you always, every choice that you're going to make is going to come at a trade of a million different choices that you could have made. So make careful choices, because people, they go on living their life and they keep making choices that are not even their own, because they keep making choices because, oh, my parents said so, or someone in my society said so, or this person said so, or my friend said so. And yes, we humans are highly social creatures, because we do that thing. But be careful about the choices you make. They're always coming at the cost of a million different ones that you could have made. So with that said, I'm going to leave you there. And remember, free will is an illusion, but you don't have to worry about that. If you have enjoyed watching this video, don't forget to watch this video on my side. It also relates to physics, philosophy, and personal development. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Continue seeking truth and become a truth seeker.